Study section 14. Learning and Memory 2. Introduction. In this lecture, you'll be exposed to stages in formation and retrieval of memory. We shall examine brain areas involved in learning and memory, such as the hippocampus, the amygdala, the striatum, or the mammillary bodies. Disorders such as amnesia, Alzheimer's disease, hypertimesia, and Korsakoff's syndrome. Also, from part of our discussion here, though not a disorder, a common temporary failure of word retrieval from memory is the tip of the tongue phenomenon. Objectives. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to 1. Explain the stages in the formation and retrieval of memory. 2. Expose the brain area involved in learning and memory. And 3. Highlight and examine disorders involved in memory loss or brain damage. Contents. In psychology, memory is an organism's mental ability to store, retain, and recall information. From information processing perspectives, there are 3 main stages in formation and retrieval of memory. These are 1. Encoding or registration, receiving, processing, and combining of received information. 2. Storage, creation of a permanent record of the encoded information. 3. Retrieval or recall, calling back the stored information in response to some clue for use in a process or activity. Sensory memory. An example of sensory memory is the ability to look at an item and remember what it looked like with just a second of observation or memorization. The first experiments exploring this form of sensory memory were conducted by George Sperling, 1960. Using the spatial report paradigm, subjects were presented with a grid of 12 letters arranged into 3 rows of 4. After a brief presentation, subjects were then played either a high, medium, or low tone, cueing them which of the rows to report. Based on these partial report experiments, Sperling, 1960, was able to show that the capacity of sensory memory was approximately 12 items, but that it degraded very quickly within a few hundred microseconds. Because this form of memory degrades so quickly, participants would see the display but be unable to report all of the items. 12 in the whole report procedure. Before they decayed, this type of memory cannot be prolonged via rehearsal. Brain areas such as the hippocampus, the amygdala, the striatum, or the mammillary bodies are thought to be involved in specific types of memory. The hippocampus is believed to be involved in spatial learning and declarative learning, while the amygdala is thought to be involved in emotional memory. Damage to certain areas in patients and animal models and subsequent memory deficits are a primary source of information. However, rather than implicating a specific area, it could be that damage to adjacent areas or to a pathway traveling through the area is actually responsible for the observed deficits. Further, it is not sufficient to describe memory and its counterparts. Learning has a solely dependence on specific brain regions. Learning and memory are attributed to changes in neuronal synapses, thought to be mediated by long-term potentiation and long-term depression. Patients with amygdala damage are no more likely to remember emotionally charged words than non-emotionally charged ones. The hippocampus is important for explicit memory. The hippocampus is also important for memory consolidation. The hippocampus receives inputs from different parts of the cortex and sends its outputs out to different parts of the brain also. The input comes from secondary and tertiary sensory areas that have processed the information a lot already. Hippocampal damage may also cause memory loss and problems with memory storage. Disorders. Much of the current knowledge of memory has come from studying memory disorders. Loss of memory is also known as amnesia. There are many sorts of amnesia, and by studying their different forms, it has become possible to observe apparent defects in individual subsystems of the brain's memory system, and thus hypothesize their function in the normally working brain. Other neurological disorders, such as Alzheimer's disease, can also affect memory and cognition. Other disorders include hyperthymesia or hyperthymetic syndrome, which is a disorder that affects an individual's autobiographical memory. This essentially means that they cannot forget small details that otherwise would not be stored. Another disorder is Korsakoff syndrome, also known as Korsakoff's psychosis. Amnesic confabulatory syndrome is an organic brain disease that adversely affects memory. Why not a disorder? A common temporary failure of word retrieval from memory is the tip of the tongue phenomenon. Sufferers of nominal aphasia, also called anomia, however, do experience the tip of the tongue phenomenon on an ongoing basis due to damage to the frontal and parietal lobes of the brain. Summary. 1. Sensory memory is the ability to look at an item and remember what it looked like with just a second of observation or memorization. 2. Brain areas such as the hippocampus, the amygdala, the striatum, or the mammillary bodies are involved in specific types of memory. 3. Loss of memory is also known as amnesia. 4. Other neurological disorders such as Alzheimer's disease can also affect memory and cognition. 5. Tip of the tongue phenomenon is not a disorder, but a common temporary failure of word retrieval from memory. End of study section 14. Thanks for listening.